This video is going to cover how you can follow best practices when setting up a cold email customer acquisition system. So it's going to cover everything from copywriting, data, infrastructure, setting up the sending automation tool, the email accounts, etc. And so, yeah, this is hopefully going to save you a ton of research when finding out what's best practices. So that's pretty much the point of this video. Now, why would you listen to me in the first place? Well, I've sent millions of cold emails. I've over $1 million in closed sales with cold email. And also, I'm a certified instantly.ai expert. So that's the fastest growing cold email tool. They've independently verified my case studies, and they recommend me as an outbound partner. So I've been in this space for a while now, and I sort of know what options there are out there, and I've tried all of them. So this is just going to give you the cheat code here for the best practices. The first thing is infrastructure. So this is going to be the domains, the email accounts, and the sending tool. These are like the basics you need to set up as the first thing to facilitate this automation. So first thing, domains. You obviously need to set up domains. You should not be sending emails from your main domain. That's going to ruin the sending reputation of your main domain, which could affect customer conversations and stuff. So you really want to make sure you're not doing any cold email outreach from your main domain. So you want to acquire new domains, essentially, that you're going to be using for the sending. I would recommend using porkbun.com for the domains. There are also other providers out there like Namecheap, GoDaddy, Squarespace, etc. But I've had the most success with Porkbun. It's been the most smooth process. They have a lot of discounts and stuff. So it's a great provider. That's what I recommend for acquiring the domains. Now, once you have the domains, they'll sit inside this admin panel you have on your domain provider, and then you can configure the settings of these domains. And more specifically, you need to look at DNS settings. And there's a lot of resources out there on this, but essentially there's something called an SPF record, DMARC record, DKIM record, and these are things that need to be set up on the domain. These are sort of technical things that need to be done in order to ensure high email deliverability, so having a good sending reputation on the domain. So that needs to be done. There's a lot of tutorials out there on how to do that. The third thing is the structure. So what I mean by structure is like how do you actually want to set up the domains and then the email licenses, right? So you want to have these domains, and then under each domain you want to have around 3 email licenses, right? And these are specific aliases, right? So you might have one domain, xyz.com, and then you have 3 aliases under that domain, which are each separate sending accounts that you can use for outreach, and those specific accounts are the ones that you connect to the sending tool that you use for the automation. So this is the best practices with how you want to sort of set up domains. Again, there are more details in specifically how to do these things, but it's available out there. But this is how you sort of want to think about it. These are the main aspects. The next thing is the email licenses. So again, these are the actual like aliases. These are the email accounts themselves, right? The email account that the prospects receive the email from. There's a few different ways of setting up email licenses. Once you have a domain, you can directly acquire these email licenses from Google or Microsoft. This works, but it's pretty expensive, right? So obviously you want to drive down your custom acquisition costs and your cost per lead and stuff. And so the best way to drive those factors down is by reducing costs. And you do that by not actually acquiring the licenses from Google or Microsoft because it is quite expensive. You also want to avoid private SMTP infrastructure, in my opinion. This is essentially like private email servers. So this is separate from Google or Microsoft, which are obviously huge providers, but these are private servers. The issue is their deliverability and their ability to avoid the spam folder is really bad, in my opinion, for most providers I've tried. So I actually stick with the best solution, in my opinion, which is Google reseller accounts. So essentially, this is like acquiring Google licenses from a reseller, which gives you a huge discount on the cost, but it still gives you similar deliverability as if you have bought them directly from Google. So in my opinion, this is the best option. We have a specific partner we use for this at ScaleSprint to set up these email licenses. So all our clients, they get their setup from the specific reseller that we are partnered with. The third thing is the sending tool. So this is obviously the tool that facilitates the automation, that facilitates the sending once you've connected your email accounts to the tool. Now, a lot of sales teams, they use legacy tools that have been used for like the past decade or whatever for cold email outreach, like HubSpot, Apollo, etc. The issue is these tools are not really tailored for the modern environment of cold email. So you actually want to use instantly.ai. This is the tool we use. We've been using for a while. Even before we were partners with them, we used them because it's just the best tool out there. And so some of the reasons for that is that they have a really large warm-up pool, which is super important. You want to obviously warm up your emails, and we've seen that this warm-up pool they have is very strong in getting that sending reputation and that sending score up for email accounts. They also have very efficient and smooth email sequencing. So like every single sending tool needs to have sort of an algorithm that they use to send out emails from each account and make sure the follow-ups are on the right accounts and stuff. And they have a very efficient algorithm for this, right? And some tools don't have that, so this is really important. They also have AI syntax spinning, AI spam word checking, right? These are things that you want to sort of make sure, and they have built-in solutions for this. They also have built-in inbox placement tests for deliverability diagnosis and monitoring, so that's great as well, because then you can sort of check whether or not you're landing in spam. And also they have a master inbox for replies. So you can see all the different replies you're getting from email campaigns. They're going to be consolidated into a master inbox. The AI automatically categorizes them based on their interest level. And then you have an AI inbox manager they have, which you can feed data to, and it can suggest replies, or it can even respond completely on its own. So that's what I recommend, is using instantly.ai. It's only $97 a month. So it's a super good solution here. Next thing is data. So what to avoid typically. You don't want to overpay for data. You don't want to use overpriced data brokers. You don't want to go with a tool like ZoomInfo where you have to pay tens of thousands of dollars for mediocre data. You also want to avoid inaccurate lists. And typically when you're getting lists from larger databases, they will have inherent inaccuracies in them, mainly because a lot of the data is originally from LinkedIn Sales Navigator, right? That's sort of the mother of all databases. And they get their info from LinkedIn, obviously, right? And there's self-reported data there. So people can give the wrong industry for their company. They can put the wrong company in their description. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And so essentially want to avoid that. And I have another point when I scroll down here about how to avoid that. And the last thing is also unverified data. So you want to make sure your data is properly verified using a tool like Million Verifier, which is the one I recommend, and just making sure you're only sending to valids and you're avoiding unverified emails and catch-all emails. Then another thing is a data strategy and roadmap. So essentially, once you have made sure that you avoid these things, you want to set up a strategy for how you actually want to acquire the data, right? And the first thing is you want to identify relevant databases. So if you're dealing with an audience that is very present and active on LinkedIn, you want to use something like Apollo for your database. You can also use LinkedIn Sales Navigator, etc. But if they're not, for example, if this is like local businesses, you might be better off doing a Google Maps scrape, or if it's super specific, if it's like 3D printing companies or something, you might want to use a directory that has already compiled companies within that particular niche, and then you want to scrape that directory. You want to use a data enrichment tool like Clay to find the names and email addresses of the people you want to reach out to, and then use that instead of using some of these other databases because they might not have this data. You also want to map out the TAM. So what I mean by that is mapping out the total addressable markets, like seeing like how many companies are there actually that fit our ICP, our profile, our target audience. And then the goal for you is to find as many email addresses of people that fit this ICP description. Now, the reason for that is obviously the larger the database you have, the more emails you can send and the more results you can get. So this is always something I say is really important. You want to find out how big, like how truly big is your total addressable market, and then deciding how much volume you want to send based on that. And this one here is going to cover sort of the data inaccuracy, right? So this is something we do for all our clients, and that is data pre-qualification. So essentially what that means is if we have these huge data lists with keywords that we've put in on a database, we want to actually make sure that we check every single lead using AI, right? So the AI is going to check their website, their LinkedIn description, their job title, etc. And then we're going to prompt it to output whether or not they're actually qualified. And this is something you can do with a tool like Clay. And then basically at scale, you can pre-qualify leads, which is very cool and is one of the best use cases for AI. And then you can remove maybe 20 to 30% of the data. That data is gone. Now it's a lot more relevant, so you're going to get less spam reports. You're going to get a better deliverability score, and also you're going to get a higher response rate and positive reply rate. So there's so many benefits to doing that. It's really a no-brainer to do that. And then obviously, as I mentioned, you want to verify your leads with a tool like Million Verifier, so you're not sending emails to non-existent email accounts, which is going to cause bounces from the email server and lower your sending score. The last thing I want to mention is copywriting. I also have a video about this on the channel, but just to briefly cover it, when you're structuring the offer, you want to make it very clear. You want to have an outcome. You want to have a number they can visualize. Maybe in some cases that's not possible, but ideally you want to have something very tangible. It's an outcome that's going to benefit them. You're going to have a timeline associated with that outcome, and you sort of want to make it a no-brainer if possible. You can't do that with all offers, but you want to try and do that. So even if you don't have like an offer that is super well designed for cold traffic, you want to be creative and think about ways of making it more of a no-brainer for them to engage with you. The next thing is the hook, right? So you want to have a good hook. You want to speak to a pain point in the first line or desired outcome, and do so in a way that's not like if you're in a very saturated space and you're saying, hey, I can do this and that, which everyone else says, then that can be problematic. But if you have something that's a bit more unique and it's a pain point that they're going to actually think, okay, I need this. I needed to see this, right? Then you can have that sort of first line that speaks to a pain or desired outcome. And then also making the first line short and easy to read, because we don't want to have them sort of skipping the email based on the first line. You also obviously want to make it feel human. You want to pique curiosity with the prospects. Typically, I say under 75 words in terms of the email length, avoiding big blocks of text, only having sort of clear, plain language and avoiding jargon, and then also asking the question, like, could somebody that's 12 years old understand the value, right? Because truly, people, and I hear clients say this all the time, they want to use all these technical terms, and they're like, oh yeah, but the customer will understand this. But in reality, it's just, they don't want to hear all that. They just want a very clear, plain message that's also conversational and not overly formal. In terms of the call to action, you obviously want to make it very easy to say yes and take that next step for the prospect. If it's very hard for them to say yes and take the next step, they're not going to do it. Also, you can, especially this is if you have like an offer where there's a lot of competitors, you want to do a low friction call to action. If you have a really, really strong offer, you can do like just a direct, do you want to book a call, sort of a call to action, but in other cases, you want to keep it relatively low friction, so open to exploring, etc. And then also you want to have a follow-up plan. So you want to obviously structure follow-ups. You don't just want to send one email to everyone. You want to have a follow-up plan. And you can also add new info to the follow-ups. So basically everything you didn't get to say in the first email, you can say in the follow-ups. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. This pretty much covers everything I wanted to mention here. If you're interested in somebody building this whole system for you, we can do that at Scale Sprints. I'll leave a link in the description. So yeah, thank you so much for watching and have a good day.